glory and the exact imprint of God's very being, and he sustains all things by his powerful word. When he had made purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high, having become as much superior to angels as the name he has inherited is more excellent than theirs. The word of the Lord.
Well, I must confess to you that I didn't put the right scripture in. I was going to do that, but then I figured out that my series for Christmas needed to start this week, or I wouldn't get them all in. So I'm just going to read quickly for you from Luke 2, 1 to 7. In those days, a decree went out from Emperor Augustus that all in the world should be registered. And this was the first registration that was taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. So all went to their hometowns to be registered. Joseph also went from the town of Nazareth in Galilee in Judea to the city of David, called Bethlehem, because he was descended from the house of the family of David. So he went to be registered with Mary, to whom he was engaged, and who was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for her to deliver her child, and she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in bands of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no place for them in the inn. So the title for this one is, Do You Have Any Room for Him in Your Life? There was no room to be found for Mary and Joseph to stay in Bethlehem. Seriously? You'd think someone would have taken pity on a very pregnant woman that day, but no one did. And why not? Several years ago, a church held a Christmas pageant with a group of 4-year-olds, and everything went pretty well until Mary and Joseph arrived at the inn. And 4-year-old Joseph asked, Do you have any room for us? No, replied the innkeeper, the inn is full. But it's so cold outside and my wife is going to have a baby. Don't you have any place for us? The little innkeeper paused for the longest time before saying, I'm not supposed to do this, but you come right in. Our Bible passage for this morning says that Mary gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling cloths and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. Now, down through the ages, there's been a few misunderstandings about Christ and the Christmas story. So we know Jesus wasn't born on December 25th. More likely it was the later part of the month of September or early October. And there's nothing about Mary riding on a donkey or anything else in Bethlehem. And despite what you may have seen as a child growing up, Jesus wasn't born in a red barn. It was a cave under a house. When I went to Israel, the guide told us that there is a common agreement that they found the cave where Jesus was born, and it was a cave that Jerome translated in the Latin Vulgate. He stayed there because he wanted to be close to the place where Jesus was born. And the 3 kings, well, they were never called kings in Scripture, wise men. And there's no number of wise men actually given. And they didn't even show up when Jesus was born. They arrived about 2 years later. And of course, most scholars take pride in telling us that Bethlehem was too small to have a day's inn. One scholar noted, the Bible never mentions an innkeeper either. In fact, it's possible there was never even an inn at all. A recent study notes that the Greek word normally translated as inn in Luke 2:7, best translated as a place to stay. Place to stay. Well, that's nice. Totally irrelevant, but nice. And any reason it's kind of irrelevant is because the main focus of Scripture was this. There was no room for them. No room for them. Whether it's an inn or a house, there was no room. So the question is, why not? Why wasn't there any room for this very pregnant mother and husband to stay? Now granted, Bethlehem was crowded because Caesar Augustus had decreed that all the world should be registered. And all went to be registered, each to their own town. So everybody who'd ever been born in Bethlehem came home. And the problem was Joseph and Mary were, you could say, late to the party. All the available space had been taken. But you'd have thought somebody would have been like that 4-year-old in the play. Somebody could have taken pity on this expected mother. Somebody could have made room. But there was nobody. There was no room anywhere. No one made room for Christ. Why? Well, I have a few thoughts about that. First, the reason is that maybe there was no room because Jesus didn't fit into their lives. John 1:1 tells us he came to his own, and his own did not receive him. People rejected Mary and Joseph partly because they had their own lives to live. They had a place to stay. Mary and Joseph didn't. Tough. We got there first in order for them to have a place to stay. Others would have had to given up their place, and they couldn't be bothered. Letting Jesus be born in their room or house was inconvenient. Now, you may have noticed over the years that people haven't changed much. Jesus is becoming more and more inconvenient, even in our culture. I went to Menards a couple of weeks before Thanksgiving. They already had started all their Christmas decorations being set up. And on these days, they'll start decorating sometimes, maybe next year it'll be the 4th of July. And you can't blame them. Christmas is their major sales event of the year. So I'm making my way down the aisles through there, and I'm looking at all the Christmas ornaments and decorations, thinking maybe I might buy something to decorate my yard this year. And I noticed they're selling all kinds of yard ornaments where there's Santas, reindeer, candy canes, lollipops. But I noticed something was missing from the Christmas displays. Can you guess what it was? That's right. There's nothing about Jesus that I could see. No manger scenes. No wise men from the east. No star to light up the heavens. The angels were even off limits. The music at the store, Santa was in. Jesus was out. Now, why would they do that? Why would they leave Christ out of Christmas? Because they might offend somebody. They offend me. Maybe you too. But apparently, you and I don't matter. But then I was lucky at the back, there actually was a manger set. So this is not surprising, I suppose, because apparently many have finally figured out that baby Jesus is dangerous. And they're right. The innocent baby born in a manger is a proclamation that God became flesh and dwelt among us. The angel told Mary they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. That's in Matthew 1:23. So people have begun to catch on that baby Jesus would one day grow up to be a man who would say things that would make people mad, maybe, a man who would be beaten and whipped and crucified and died on the cross. And all that would happen because Jesus had come to die for sinners, which means everybody's a sinner. People don't like to hear that. That truth is inconvenient. It's inconvenient for a world that would rather not be bothered. There's no room in their homes. no room in their lives for Jesus to be born. Now we can be upset about that, or we can take it as a challenge. Do you realize that we're beginning to face the same challenges that Jesus faced when he was born? John 1:11 says he came to his own, and his own did not receive him. People didn't get all excited about accepting him then, and they're not going to get excited about accepting him now. And yet followers of Christ literally turned the world upside down. People became Christians by the thousands, and they didn't even have a manger scene in their yards to proclaim their faith. How could Christians possibly have changed the world without Christmas decorations to proclaim that Jesus had been born? Well, they did that by talking to people about Jesus. They told others why he meant so much to them. In the same way, in how we can change the world around us. And if we can use the Christmas story to do that, so much the better. But we've got to realize our culture isn't going to help us as much as it once had done. Just like the early church, it's really all up to us. So the first reason there's no room in the inn was Jesus didn't fit into their lives. And the second was this: Jesus' message didn't fit into their thinking. I could try to explain this in various ways, but the first thing that occurred to me was Mary was pregnant. And her pregnancy had been tainted of a little illegitimacy. She grew up in Bethlehem. Joseph was still betrothed to her. They weren't technically man and wife yet. So maybe many folks believe she either had been sleeping around or Joseph got her pregnant before he married her. Either way, no one wanted her in their home. There was no room because they saw her as a sinful woman. From his birth onward, the question of who his father was everywhere. In those days, if a boy was illegitimate, he was often named after the town that he came from. Thus, you never hear of Jesus being called Jesus ben, the son of Joseph. But he's almost always referred to Jesus of Nazareth. And in the midst of his ministry, his enemies snidely said, "We are not illegitimate children," implying that he was. That's in John 8. Now, do you think God knew they'd say that? You think when God set this whole thing in motion of having a virgin bear the child of Christ, that people would accuse him of being illegitimate? Of course he did. It was part of the gospel message. Now think about this. Who carried Jesus into Bethlehem? Mary. And if I'm right, Mary was rejected because of the sin people that they saw in her life. Thus, people had no room for Jesus because they had no room for sinners. But sinners were who Jesus came to save. And sinners were the ones that Jesus used to spread his message. The gospel was spread by people who were the imperfect and the rejected of the world. Back in December of 1792, a boy named Joseph Moore was born in Salzburg, Austria. He was illegitimate. Daddy got his mama pregnant and then left town. Children born out of wedlock were looked down on by Austrians, and they levied a heavy fine on Joseph's mother. In addition, because of his illegitimacy, he was banned from attending school, learning a trade, or even holding a job. But Joseph Moore loved to sing, and eventually became a priest. One night he wrote a song you may know. Silent night, holy night, All is calm, all is bright. Run, young virgin, mother and child. Holy infant, tender and mild. Sleep in heavenly peace. Sleep in heavenly peace. Silent Night is one of the most popular Christmas songs ever written. It's been translated into 200 languages, and God used the once rejected illegitimate child of Joseph to write a song of praise for the baby Jesus. The baby who also faced rejection and was accused of being illegitimate. So the point is, God can use and will use anyone who's willing to tell others about Jesus. It doesn't matter who you are, or what you've done, or where you've been. God can and He will use you if you let Him. Now that leads to the third reason I believe people had no room for Jesus. Babies are cute, especially my granddaughter Parker. But they really can't do anything for us, or for you. They gurgle and smile and are entertaining, but they don't do anything. You need to feed them, burp them, and change them, and that's about it. When it comes to Jesus, a lot of people don't have room for Him because they don't see Him as doing anything for them. There's a lot of people who won't become Christians because they don't think they need Him. A pastor once talked with Jim Thompson, a former member who had moved to Florida, and he told of a couple he'd been talking about Jesus with down in Florida. He noted that they were nice people, and that was the problem, because they didn't think they needed Jesus. This couple believed God would accept them because they were nice people. As John 1:11 says, He came unto His own, and His own rejected Him. Why would folks